Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Fearless and Free TV. I hope that you are living as fearlessly and free as absolutely possible. And before I bring in today's guest, who I'm really excited to bring to you today because he's a new friend, but a very dear friend that I'm going to be sharing today. Before I bring him on, I want to remind all of you, if you haven't already, to hop on over to my website at victoriareynolds.com/free and pick up your free copy of Rise Up. It's a free book I have available for you. And it's all about the Great Awakening, spiritual revolution, and the Ascension. It's a simplified guide about what's going on in the world right now. And so now let's bring in my very dear friend, Steve Weber. Good morning, Steve.
Hi, Victoria. How are you doing?
Good. I guess it's morning for me. Might not be for you, where you are in the world.
It's I'm on the East Coast, so it's afternoon, but that's okay.
Yeah. So it's a good day, Steve Weber.
Yeah. So the last time I was on your show, I was sitting right next to you in your studio.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. It was so much fun having you here.
That was back in March, so that was 6 months ago now.
Yeah.
We had a good time.
A lot longer than that for some reason.
There's been just a few things that have happened in the world since then, hasn't there?
Yeah, it's crazy how much, and I think this kind of started in 2020. I was talking to my kids, and it was, how much can you cram into 1 year? And that's what 2020 felt like, and that's what 2021 is feeling like too. We're just like, it's like time is going fast, but at the same time, we're cramming so much into this short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a fun time, and it really is a fun time to be alive and to be experiencing all this. And I've really come to believe the last couple of years. I didn't believe it up until just a few years ago that we are these eternal beings and that we choose to come into this lifetime and that we had a conscious choice to come and enter into it. And then, of course, we forget and we have to relearn and figure all this stuff out. But with the help of people like you and many others that have been guiding and coaching, and my own awakening several years ago, it's like it's all making sense now. And it didn't make sense before that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And it doesn't make sense until you finally have that awakening experience. And I think a lot of us have it. It's actually like an awakening experience. The spiritual 2x4 in the back of the head, as one of my friends calls it, that kind of wakes us up. And then we start down this awakening path of, oh my gosh, there's that, and there's that, and there's that, and there's that. And then starting to remember who we are and remember why we're here.
Yeah.
And that's not talked about in our religiosities. It's not talked about in our school systems. It's not talked about anywhere. It's something that we kind of first have to experience for ourselves. And then all of a sudden, other people that are in there start showing up everywhere.
Yep. No, it's and what I love about this time for us right now is that there are so many teachers coming forward, so many different perspectives and points of view that every day is almost like you said cramming, where every day is a learning experience. And so this is really a fun time to be alive.
It really is. For people who are awake and aware of what's going on in the world, it's a very, very exciting time to be alive. And on the flip side of it, those who don't know what's going on, it's a very frightening time to be alive.
Yeah. What's interesting is I was there in March and we had a chance to visit. We did a couple shows. You were a guest on my show and I was a guest on your show. So we had a chance to kind of really, talk about a variety of topics. And it was really about a month after that when I got home that my awakening to everything that's going on started going at like 99 miles an hour. Up until then, I was aware, and I had been, 10 years into my own awakening as far as consciousness goes, and as far as taking responsibility for my life, more of a spiritual awakening. But I had been very paid attention to politics over the years, but boy, did I have a limited perspective of everything everything that is going on and has been going on. I knew there was I knew the apple was rotten to the core, but I didn't like have a good, clear understanding of it. And just in these last, 5 months, I mean, I have learned so much. It's been so much fun to piece this all together and follow people who have been guiding us. And you've been one of those guides, but there's many others. And that's what we need to do is we need multiple perspectives, because we hear things from different people, different ways. And when you start to hear the same thing or something that sounds similar from a couple different people, that's when you can put like the pieces together and really come to your own conclusion about it.
Right. And that's why it's so important for so many of us to be out here on camera having these conversations. And some of it's going to resonate with some people and some of it won't. But the important thing is that we have these different perspectives. And the other thing, as I've been saying the last few years, is that the muscle humanity is learning to use is discernment. It's a muscle we've never had to use before because the information has always been controlled.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just we were really spoon-fed. We were told what to believe. Not even spoon-fed. We were like we had sacks of flour dumped on top of our head with it. Like this is what you believe. This is what you believe. And we didn't know. We just thought it was the truth. And why would these people lie to us? Why would religions? Why would news people, why would government lie to us? And we're discovering all that now. So it's yeah,
and it's interesting because a lot of it started back 20 years ago with the music industry, how the music industry the internet created a shift in the music industry and people became independent creators. And the book industry, people suddenly had the ability to write their own books, and the internet allowed people to write their own posts. And so before, that was all controlled. The newspapers controlled what we were allowed to see. Our churches controlled what we were allowed to believe. The book industry controlled what we were allowed to read. The music industry controlled what we were allowed to listen to. So the internet has allowed us to start to break out of those controlled narratives. And although there are people who are still trying to control the narrative, I mean, the news is very specific what they want us to believe, and our religions still have what they want us to believe. But we no longer have to be contained in those little boxes of belief. We can search outside of those for concepts and ideas that resonate with us, that call to our higher sense of self. That's beyond those controlled narratives. And so at the same time, there are people who are able to hit, like I was saying 5 years, the internet allows anybody to speak their truth, anybody to speak their truth. Now, whether it's loving or not, that's where we have to discern. And this discernment muscle is so new for the human mind. A lot of people still don't know how to use it.
Right. It's a learning process. It's not something that you just instantly, because we're used to hearing things and believing them. And then all of a sudden you're hearing so much from so many new voices and different people that, you want to believe things, but then you get to the point where you're like, well, maybe what can I believe and what should I believe? And so now I kind of, when I look like at the main street media, you just don't believe hardly anything they say. You figure that all of that's is nonsense, and then you hear this other stuff, and the thing that gives me hope, Victoria, is that there's too many good people saying things that sound similar and have that same theme to it, that that it makes more sense to me. That's the discernment part. It rings true, it resonates, and it's more optimistic. And a couple of years ago when I started American Gumption, it was all about sharing optimism, because there wasn't the bigger the media and the government, they weren't feeding us optimism, they were feeding us fear.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's all about as I call it, the television and the programming, right? So we're programmed to believe in dystopia.
Yeah.
That's all and I had this conversation with my son a couple of years ago, and I said, I believe utopia is possible. Because, Mom, everybody knows utopia is not possible. Every movie that's ever been made, every story that's ever been written in history, the only thing that works is dystopia. I'm like, I don't believe that. I refuse to believe that. Just because that's what we're told doesn't mean that it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we need to have more of these kinds of shows that teach people what's possible.
Yeah.
Better stories, true stories, what's really possible for humanity. And first, there is some of that looking at the ugliness that at the collective of humanity is doing its shadow work.
Yeah.
And shadow work is not easy.
No, there's so much, when you start to get into all of the possibilities, we were told for a long time that the world is like this, and suddenly we're like going, oops, here we are. Suddenly we're like, the world is really like this, but yet we thought it was like this. So, man, there's just an awful lot of information and new things, and the people who are unaware of what's happening, I think they're going to be surprised. And I think you and I, who have been paying attention to it, are going to be surprised. So there's big stuff happening, and we maybe we'll be overwhelmed by it all. I don't know. There's you think you kind of are ready, and you think you're prepared for it, and we're like, I'm kind of like, come on, let's bring it on. Let's move this ship. Use the ship metaphor. Let's bring the ship in the port and unload that stuff. And so it's interesting. It's a very interesting time that we live in. And I think what I was hoping to talk a little bit about today is gumption. And I have been on my own journey of the last year of just being a host, interviewing people, talking to people like yourself and others, and for the most part, listening and allowing new ideas to come in, and asking good questions. And then I do a little monologue at the beginning of my shows where I get to kind of share some of my thinking, and so that's kind of fun. But for the most part, I haven't shared what gumption is all about. And 10 years ago, I went on a journey of figuring out what gumption was, living your life with gumption. And now I feel like maybe it's time to, really start to share that with the world more, because I don't want to say I've been holding back, because it's been in like a work in progress, and you get to the point where it's like, okay, it's time to share it with the world. So anyway, here we are. Want to talk about that?
Yeah. Sorry. There's a very, very, very important text message that came through. So I'm just saying, I'm doing a show.
Yeah.
So she knows not to bother me.
Well,
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I normally wouldn't do that, but I'm waiting. I'm working on a project that is very, so exciting. I can't even tell you what it is. So I just I'm doing a show. I can't talk right now. So I have to call her back in an hour.
Well, good. So anyway, I think it's a time for all of us to step into our own, our own power and our own, we all have a gift. We all have something special to offer the world. And 10 years ago, my career as the Forrest Gump impersonator came to an end, and I had this kind of unique gift of gumption. And people still are fascinated by the story, and so we've shared it before when I've been on your a guest on the show. But I've never really known how to use it, in this kind of next phase. I've tried this, I've tried that. None of them really, felt like the right thing. I mean, you try it, and it works for a while, but then you're like, yeah, that's not quite it. And so anyway, I'm just wondering, as this awakening unfolds, maybe there's an opportunity for people to think more about how they can live their lives with gumption, because discernment takes gumption. Living a 5D life is going to take gumption, especially in that transformation from the 3D life and through the 4D phase. And so there's a lot of opportunities, and there's a lot of challenges that we all face, and we all bring our teaching in that unique way. So if it's okay, can I share my screen?
Absolutely. And by the way, Steve, I didn't even think of the word gumption until I met you. And I love that word. I actually use it all the time now, because it's like, gumption.
It's funny when I'm reading a book and somebody, somebody gets mentioned as, liking, somebody has gumption. I always notice it. It's not one of those words that's, super popular. So anyway, let's just go ahead and jump into this, and I'm not going to tell too much of the backstory because, that you've heard that before, and people can watch that on some of the other ones. But I'm imagining living your life with gumption. That's been the tag from 10 years ago, but I didn't know what that meant. And so now I'm going to try to equate it to the Great Awakening, so that people who are in that process of awakening can potentially use gumption. And I'll go through it. But the first thing I want to do is let's just take a minute. And when was your awakening? And I'm asking that generically for people out there in the world listening to this, whether they're live or whether watching the replay. But when was your awakening? And that's an important thing, because we get to a certain point where suddenly, like, everything we thought we knew, like, we realize that, oops, that's not necessarily the truth. And then that's the awakening moment. At least that's my belief. What do you think about that, Victoria?
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember my awakening back. It started in 2008 with the economic crash of 2008, and my life just started falling apart. And what I found is that the awakening tends to be aligned with the death of something. If it's the death of a business, or the death of a loved one, or the death of a belief system, or a death of something, and we have to go through that process of, there's a grieving process that goes with that. And then, in that grieving process, there's also this, oh my gosh, this is what's really going on in the world. It's kind of like something that blasts our mind open and blasts our heart open to be able to experience the human experience from a completely different perspective. And, so for a lot of humanity, that was the virus of 2020, the lockdown, that woke a whole bunch of people up, because it was suddenly like, whoa, everything I've ever relied on for my life is suddenly not real. And I mean, in your case, I know it was the end of your position as Gump.
Yeah,
so we all have that, and that it's intended to crack us open.
Yeah, and my awakening was really the same time as yours, because it was the financial crisis of 2008 that really triggered it. I call 2009 the year, because that's when I started to take control of my life, and I got involved with some personal development courses, and I spent the better part of the year just deciding what I believed and what I didn't believe, and what was I was coming to the end of being Gump for Bubba Gump, and I was going to be a speaker. That was my goal. And I had that title, Live Your Life with Gumption. I had that as one of my presentations, but I really didn't have it filled in. I didn't know what that meant. I had several other titles that kind of never stuck, but Live Your Life with Gumption certainly did. And I didn't have the 3 principles of gumption figured out back then, and I didn't have the movie Life Lessons figured out back then. And what I had to do, Victoria, was I kind of showed this little graphic, but I imagine this is my brain, and I had to go in and excavate every belief that I had out, and put it into a dump truck, and wheel it off, and examine it and say, is this good stuff? Should I keep this, or should I get rid of it? And so I went through about a 5-year period where I really was, at times I was lost, and at times I was just making slow, steady progress in terms of what it was that I believed. But I feel like that process allowed me to go, okay, there's an awful lot of stuff that I was programmed to believe, and but they weren't my own beliefs. And so you kind of get rid of those. Some of them you actually keep, and then you bring in your own beliefs, and but that takes that's not for the faint of heart. It takes some time to go through that whole process. So
I often say that disbelieving what you've always believed is really painful, or it can be. It depends on how attached you are to those beliefs, but it can be extremely painful to disbelieve what you've always believed. And the most important thing is that we be compassionate with ourselves as we're going through the process. And it can, like you. So for me, it started with 2008, losing my business. But like you, 2009 is when I jumped in and started doing the self-help work. I had done it years before, but I completely forgot about it. I'd been busy being married and having kids and life. And in 2009, I jumped back into my self-improvement process, just like you, and started unpacking my beliefs.
So I want to share this one quote. I never know what I think about something until I read what I've written on it. William Faulkner. I came across that about 2 years into my journey, and I had been blogging and writing, and I realized that by writing, I was like defining. That was what was allowing me to come to what I believe. Because when you just like allow the thoughts to rattle around in your head and the little voice just keeps talking and chattering, I mean, that's like all somewhat useful, but until you actually like put it down on paper and for me to look at it and to read it and actually for like when I would publish a blog post and then I would go and I'd read what I've written, that was really when it became kind of like, oh yeah. And then you would know, you go, either it was your belief or it wasn't. So for me, that was really helpful and fun.
Mm-hmm. You know what's funny about that, Steve, is you know how on Facebook it pops up a memory every once in a while of. So I've kind of had that. I haven't gone back into my blog post, but every once in a while, Facebook will pop up a message from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I've been on Facebook for like 10 years, and I read what I wrote, and I go, "Yep, still the same."
Yep.
Like. Because I didn't start writing until I had those awarenesses and those epiphanies, and that, like you, that's when I started writing, and it's still the same.
Yeah. So I'm going to share this one. This is for people who don't know the story. I was Forrest Gump for Bubba Gump for 15 years, and this particular picture is the grand opening day, or that it was taken on the grand opening day in Monterey, California, and that appeared the next day on the day after the grand opening, but it was like on the front page in color above the fold, and I went, wow. And it was really kind of heady, and it said plenty of gumption. But what's funny about this is 1996. I remember going, gumption. I'm Forrest Gump. I'm not gumption. I didn't quite know what gumption meant, but here, like again, keep going, you fast forward, and now it's 2009, 10, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this gumption word, I mean, this is my word. I have to take advantage of this and begin to do it. And so, the gumption word just became kind of like this golden thing that kept calling to me, like, well, what does it mean? What does it really mean? So let's just start out with the dictionary definition of gumption. And basically it has three different meanings. The first one is initiative. So someone who has gumption takes action. They have the initiative. They don't need to be told what to do. They just sort of go and do it, and they just know what to do, or they try something and they take action in order to get things to start to happen. So people with gumption, people who at times we have it in ourselves, and other times we don't have it. So it's but there's two more definitions. Courage is the second one. So it's like overcoming your fears, not being afraid. It's funny. Initiative is an action word. It's really action oriented. Courage is an action word, but it's also a mindset word. So someone with courage, doesn't allow their fears to hold them back. So if you have gumption, you're not afraid to take calculated risks. You'll do things. You might think about them and you might figure it out, but you're not afraid to just move forward and take that initiative and get something done. What's the worst that can happen? Maybe it doesn't work out. And then finally, the third one is common sense, and that's definitely a mindset thing. That's like believing in yourself that you can just figure things out. And so pretty cool word, gumption, initiative, courage, and common sense. But I wanted to be a speaker, and I wanted to live your life with gumption. And a couple years earlier, I had a coach, and the coach asked me, well, what do you want to speak about? And I said, I want to speak about personal responsibility. And this coach said, nobody will pay you to talk about personal responsibility. You need to talk about diversity or sales or marketing or leadership, you can't be talking about a soft skill, personal responsibility, because that's just not going to, you won't make any money doing that. Well, again, I followed my heart, my instinct, and I went, well, I want to talk about personal responsibility. So anyway, what I did was I kind of reinvented Gumption to be my own idea. And three things: it's the way you think, your mindset, the way you act, moxie, which is actually a synonym for Gumption, moxie. And moxie is like an energetic person. It was actually a drink, kind of like a Red Bull drink in Maine in the 1900s or the late 1800s. And so somebody with moxie was energetic and got things done. It was an action that it's like kind of that initiative. And so then graciousness, how you interact with others, was it. So the way you think, the way you act, and the way you interact with others. And when you put them all together, I said, taking personal responsibility for your thoughts, actions, and interactions, that's when you function with Gumption. So I created this little graphic, and that big gear is your thinking. And the reason why the big gear is your thinking is because it drives everything else. If you don't have your thinking right, if you have a bad attitude, if you have a defeatist attitude or a glass half full kind of attitude, it's going to be hard to, be positive with doing what you need to do, your actions, and interacting with other people. So I always, so I made the big gear, the biggest one, your thoughts, because that seems like if you can get that right, the rest of the things become easier. And then the next gear I want to show is the little gear that's attached directly to the big gear, and that's the stuff that you do day in and day out. Before, when we, setting up this show, you have to create the little graphic that does it. You have to go into the account and set it up. That's like kind of the action stuff that you have to do to, we all have all those like chores that need to be done. They're not necessarily fun and exciting to do on a day in and day out basis. But if you don't do them, like feeding your kids, making dinner, if you don't do it, like it causes trouble. So, it's the action or the things that you have to take care of. And I think that they're directly connected with each other. So your actions directly connect to your mindset. Now, the third one is the other interacting with other people, and that's a little gear, and that's off to the side, and you can see it's connected with a chain. And you have any idea, Victoria, why it's connected with a chain and not directly connected?
And I'll let you answer that.
Well, it's not great because everybody else is their own big gear. So you are your own big gear. I'm my own big gear, and you're a mama. How well can you directly influence your kids? It's like that chain is like the reaching out part, and the connecting with them and allowing them to be their own big gear. And the example I like to share with the chain is that sometimes, I've been in situations where, you're mad at somebody and you kind of go, okay, I'm going to let them come to me first and apologize because I'm right and they're wrong. I end up reaching out to them, and because I'm tired of, like I wanted to move on. And so you go, no. And they immediately will reciprocate and come back and go, oh, I was just going to, I wanted to clean this up. I'm glad you did it. And so if we can be the bigger person and always be reaching out to others, and that's what taking, responsibility for our interactions with others is being that person who is extending and reaching out. The other person in 99 out of 100 times is going to come right back. That loop is going to get closed off. And every once in a while it doesn't work. And, that's just human nature, and that's the way things go. But boy, it just sure does seem that it works most of the time. So anyway, that's really the whole story there. That's the function with Gumption logo. And again, these things all got made up all of those, years ago. I wasn't 100% sure what to do with them. I want to go back to that one more time. There's a feather in there, and I think you know what the feather means. Mm-hmm. You want to give it away?
I don't know. I think it's about bringing your higher guidance into everything you do.
Yeah, the
You know,
feather is
it
the
could represent the feather, the angels. And it just depends on how someone refers to their higher guidance, your guides, your angels, God, source, whatever your personal label is for. But this is about inviting a higher guidance to be a part of assisting the entire operation of life.
I like that. I like that a lot. Now I'm going to, I'm going to connect it to the movie Forrest Gump. So I'm going to have a slightly different twist on the feather because you'll remember the feather came and lands at
Mhm.
the foot of Forrest Gump at the beginning. But it is that, it's that magical moments, those things that just show up in our lives as if they divinely come to us. So we'll talk about that in just a minute. And then one of the things that I like to do is to point out that if you function with Gumption, what are the first three letters of the word function?
Fun.
Fun. Yeah, we're having fun. And, when I was Forrest Gump, that was one of the most important things that I had to do. I had to show up and be having fun every day on my job the entire time that I was there. Can you imagine that you have a job where you have to be having fun? Because if I wasn't having fun, other people weren't having fun, and then I was a useless entertainer and performer in what I was doing. So could you imagine if like all of our jobs were like fun was like one of the things that was like required that you do? So I think that's what we're moving into. So I'm
I
optimistic.
agree. I
Yeah.
I think it all needs to be fun. It's funny. I go back to the old saying in the Bible somewhere of life is that we might have joy. Like it's intended to be fun. This
Yeah.
whole idea that life is hard work is part of the controlled narrative, part of the narrative that we've been fed. It's false
Struggle,
programming. Yeah.
toil. Maybe then you'll get into heaven. Maybe. No guarantees. So anyway, to kind of continue on with this story of Gumption, this is a little bit different, but because it was such a big part of my life, the movie, and people relate to it, I thought, what really are the life lessons from the movie? And I initially, when I tried to answer this, I came up with 25 different life lessons, and I, initially the first few times I went out and talked, I tried to go through all 25, and it was not like very effective because it was too much. It was fun,
Mhm.
but it was like confusing because it was like, well, what's the point of this whole thing? So anyway, I came up with three, but I want to ask you beforehand, and I'm asking everybody who's watching this, what movie scene is memorable for you? What, people, I was lucky. I talked to about 1 million people over that 15-year period, interacting as Gump, and people would tell me their favorite movie, or their favorite scene from it, and or memorable scene. Do you have anything that jumps out at you, Victoria?
Oh, I love that entire movie.
Yeah,
I From beginning to end, the entire thing. I don't know how many times I've seen it, and every time I watch it, it's one of those movies that makes me laugh and it makes me cry and it makes it's so rare that there's a movie that draws on all of your emotions, and that movie has the capacity to do that. There aren't very many like that, but
no,
that's one of
most
those.
movies kind of come and go, right? They come out and they don't make an impact on the world. Now, it was 1994, so the internet, all the options that we have now for communication weren't yet fully formed. So the movie was still kind of a bigger part of everybody's life. And but boy, yeah, what's a movie in the last couple of years that like everybody kind of changed their life or made them stop and think and go, wait, this is a better way. Maybe being Gump-like isn't such a bad thing. Maybe we all should be a little more Gump-like. So anyway, I came up with three life lessons. Whoops. Let's go back one. Here we go. So the feather represents the opportunities that come into your life. And if you remember or recall, at the very opening scene, we see the feather floating around in the sky and the camera's following it, and it goes past the top of the trees and the church steeple. And then it ultimately comes down and lands at the foot of Forrest Gump, and he reaches down and he picks it up. And the feather represents opportunities that come into your life. And it's almost like they're magic, Now, I've become a law of attraction fan the last few years, so I realize now that, we actually attract the feathers. There are no coincidences. The feathers that were supposed to show up, show up. But, in that earlier phase of life, and the awakening phase of life, think about all the things, the unique things that have happened in your life where they just are like magic when they show up. And, it wasn't like you were planning it. But here's the thing about the opportunities, Victoria, you need to reach down and pick them up. They don't jump up. They land at your feet, but they don't jump up magically into your lap or into your hand. You have to actually make some effort and grab them. And then once you do, you own it, right? You can do with it what you want. So the first life lesson from the movie is the feathers and the opportunities that come into your life, and just go ahead and grab them, and there's no shortage of feathers, lots of feathers out there. You get to choose whatever one you want. Now, speaking of choosing whatever one you want, life is like
a box of chocolates.
Yeah. So the line from the movie is, life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. And it was funny, as I started thinking about that more deeply from a more awakened state, I went, that's a really good line for a movie. It's a really good line for a mama to tell a 5-year-old boy who's trying to make sense of the world in his own 5-year-old mind, and getting disappointed. And so if you compare some of the disappointments to life as being like a box of chocolates, it certainly makes it a more cheerful version, because, there's not certainty which one, but heck, all of the chocolates are going to taste good. You're probably going to get a good one. It's just a matter of whether it's your favorite one or good, better, or best. And so anyway, I like to say life is like a box of chocolates. You get to choose whatever chocolate you want, and you get to choose whatever life you want. And we actually do choose whatever life we want. Our thoughts, back to that thought thing, that big gear, our thoughts really do drive and tell us what we end up getting. So life is like a box of chocolates. We get to choose, whatever chocolate or whatever life we end up wanting and getting. So it's really all about choices and making good choices throughout your life. So you've had a little bit of experience with chocolate boxes, haven't you, over the years, Victoria?
Well, yes.
Some of us are experts at this.
There's this really giant one in the store during Christmas and St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day. And so I always get the giant box of chocolates because my son's a big chocolate fan. For some reason, I ate chocolate a lot when I was pregnant with him, and that's one of his favorite things in the whole world.
Well, that's funny that you you fed it to him as a embryo and as a developing child, and here he has a nice taste for it. Isn't that? It's a coincidence, huh?
No, well, that's actually been proven that kids develop a taste for what it is their moms eat when they're pregnant, which is interesting.
That's great. So the third life lesson. So the first one was the feather, the opportunities. The second one was the chocolate box, and the fact that we have choice and we get to choose whatever one we want. And then the third symbol from the movie or life lesson is the shoe. And the shoe represents the journey of life or the life chapters. So really, it's kind of like, it's really the journey of life and the life chapters. And it's a little bit hard to see, but that timeline there is basically Forrest Gump's journey. It's what the movie's all about. He's a boy, and then he goes to high school, and then he plays football in college, and he's in the Army. First he's a soldier, and then he plays ping pong, shrimp boat captain, and he retires, and then he runs across America, and then he finds out he's a husband and a father. So that, like in a short little condensed version, that's what the movie's all. It's just the story of a man's life, but yet all the remarkable things that he did and all the fun things and the way he did it. He lived with gumption. He lived fully. He lived presently. Mm-hmm. And, he didn't have the highest IQ, but he knew how to actually love. He knew how to be present. And that was one of the other things I mentioned, that I had to have fun when I was being Forrest Gump, and I had to be present. And that was, be sitting there talking to people. You can't give people attention if you're not present. And so I had to learn how to stay present for like 5 hours at a time. And it was a great experience, and I love it. And yeah, being present, because everything, and if you look at the timeline, everything happens in the upper right hand corner. Like the movie ends with him being a husband and father, but at the beginning, when he's a boy, imagine that little triangle or rectangle being like smaller. Well, all of life occurs in the upper right hand corner, and it's just always being present. That's what present always is living life in the, not worrying about what previous chapters and what had happened in the past, and not worrying about what maybe is to come. Now we all like to plan, and we like to try to predict what's happening, and and there's nothing wrong with making plans, but if you're like sacrificing all of your love and your joy for some future, like if this happens, then that's when I'll be happy. The problem is that you never get there. It's always, you live that whole life missing out on it. So learning how to just be happy in the moment and enjoying the moment, and remembering the things that happened in a way that is helpful and positive, and planning for things that is helpful and positive, but staying in that present moment. That's what Forrest Gump did. He was, he was brilliant at it. So yeah, pretty good.
The things well, two things. One, what I loved about Forrest Gump is that he really lived his life without fear. He was fearless.
Yes, he was.
And the other thing I get from that diagram you just showed me is that I hadn't thought about that before, the way you have it going up to right. So what I was seeing is that in every area of life, we're always going up and expanding.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is, it's like this, the rectangle is really small, and then it expands to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. As we're moving up, we're also expanding.
And if we compare it to what's happening in our world today, it's an ascension that happens. So, that life is an ascension. Well, we are going through a massive ascension right at the moment, aren't we? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. So yeah, I like, it's, there's a spiritual aspect of the movie that, he just is, he just is truthful. He's goodness. He's not, he's out to help people. He's out to take care of himself, his family. He just wants to live in the moment, and he just wants to live with what the truth is. So yeah, we were taught not to do those things.
Yeah, and he lives his life without pretension, and he's just he always wants to be a good person, and he's kind and thoughtful, and then being the best person he can be without making anyone else be less than their best as well.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. I see a couple of people are chiming in, so let's see. We got, I'm going to throw this up here. I'll help you out. Peter Mitchell says, Gumption, an old Yorkshire word. Okay, so there you go. It's from England. I love that. Yeah, and Julian says, Forrest Gump, not Forrest Grump. Exactly. We don't need any grumps in this world. We got too many grumps. We need more Gumps, not more grumps. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
So anyway, I just want to, let me just wrap it up by saying, it's funny. I don't have the same gifts that some of the people that I interview on, in terms of like connecting to, channeling or receiving, and I'm working on those, and those things I feel confident will develop in time. But for right now, I feel like my job in this process and in this world is to help people by delivering optimism and encouragement, Mostly encouragement. People need encouragement more than anything else, because this is going to be a challenge that we're all going through, and it's hard to keep your energy at that positive level all the time. And so people, as they're going through this awakening, they need to be encouraged and cheered on. And I think that's what Gumption is all about: is helping our fellow man, cheering them on, fellow man, fellow woman, cheering them on, and helping everybody come to their own discernment and their own beliefs about what is right for them. So yeah, it's an exciting time.
It really is. Yeah. And I love that word gumption. When you're talking about courage, courage actually comes from the heart.
Mm.
And that's what's starting to wake up in humanity, is that this new reality that we are wanting to create is heart-based.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that these awakenings are so important is because they crack the heart open so that it can work to its fullest potential. And so what tends to happen with these awakening experiences, what feels like heartbreak in the beginning, but it's not about heartbreak as much as it's about cracking the heart open.
Mm-hmm.
But in the beginning, it doesn't feel that way. In the beginning, it just feels like heartbreak.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's necessary to purge fear. So fear actually creates like encapsulations. If you think of it like, a heart that's got gunk in the arteries, that's kind of what fear does to our heart, is it keeps the heart from working to its fullest potential. So these awakening experiences actually kind of purge the heart of its limitations that have been created by fear. And Gump didn't seem to have those. Maybe it's because he was, as some would call, a little bit dim-witted, but he didn't have that corruption of the heart that fear causes. It wasn't part of his programming.
Let me. I have a quote here. I'm gonna. A friend of mine just recently told me this. Gump was a guy that didn't know what he couldn't do. Gump was a guy who didn't know what he couldn't do. And we all have decided where our boundaries are in our life. And Gump, didn't know what was possible or what was impossible. So consequently, everything was possible.
Right.
He didn't put limitations on it. And if did he come to that because he was a little bit slow or dim-witted? Well, then maybe we need more slow and dim-witted people. Yeah.
Or he just wasn't ever taught that. He had his mom was so loving that he was never taught what he couldn't do. Remember, he'd go to school and the kids might have been mean to him, but his mom would say, don't let it get to you, Forrest. You can be anybody you want to be. So that was his programming. I don't think it had to do with being dim-witted, although some people would say that. Maybe he didn't get the same programming as other people because he wasn't expected to get the same programming as other people. Therefore, he didn't actually participate in it.
Yeah, that's so true.
What I'm sensing is it's actually kind of the other way around. It's like once we realize how brilliant we are, so it's not about dimming the mind to not see and recognize the fear. It's more about removing all of the stuff from our mind that's keeping us from recognizing our own brilliance.
Yeah. Or just self-acceptance, self-love.
It's the same kind of thing, though. Every one of us is brilliant.
Yeah.
We're all this amazing, brilliant light that exists within every one of us, but our brilliance kind of gets dumbed down through all the programming.
Yeah, we're taught not to believe that.
Yeah.
We're taught not to believe that we're brilliant. Yeah. So Gump is Gump has obviously played a big role in my life, right? I was the character for 15 years as an impersonator. And then the last 10 years I've been speaking about, the movie and some of the life lessons. And, at this point, I feel like my job is to, a couple of years ago, I said, I'm kind of rebranding myself an American Gumption. And the idea was I'm going to travel the U.S. and maybe the world, but certainly the U.S. in an RV and meet people and interview them. And then, of course, this was about 3 years ago, and what, a year and a half ago, we all got locked down, and so I never quite made it out in terms of being out there. But coming up, hopefully in the the not too distant future, all of this craziness is going to be more or less in the rear view mirror. And then, we'll take American Gumption out on the road and start interviewing people face to face and in person, and not doing it, virtually. So good things are coming.
Absolutely. And I don't think it's that far down the road.
No,
I think, the rest of this year could be a little bumpy for people. And 2022, I think, might be a little bumpy as we learn how to leave the past behind.
Yep.
But I think a lot of us are going to hit the road, so to speak. I plan on hitting the road too. It's funny how our stories are so similar, because as you were talking about how you're writing up you wanted to be a speaker and you came up with this idea for teaching Gumption, at exactly the same time I was going to Toastmasters and learning how to be a speaker, and I wanted to be a speaker and to teach about what I was called, the name of my presentation was Breaking Free. What's really interesting is I'm still talking about freedom 10 years later, well, like 13 years later, and you're still talking about Gumption 13 years later. It's kind of like the core brand, if you will, from a branding perspective of what our soul is here to do. Like, you have your word is Gumption. My word is freedom.
And what's funny is I listen to people who I said gave me some advice that was kind of not so good, like, or maybe it was good advice, but I just rejected it, and I go, no, I want to talk about personal responsibility. So I made Gumption be a form of personal responsibility. Well, that actually turned out to work in my favor, because if I had just talked about personal responsibility, I might not have chosen to use the word Gumption as part of my branding, and that needed to be part of it. So I just think that we're on a soul journey path, and when we listen to our inner knowing, we always make the right decision. And it's pretty easy to look backwards and go, yeah, that was like a decision that was made, with the soul inner knowing, and that was a good decision because here it is all these years later and it's still on the path. And then there were other decisions that, like, you tried to think your way through it, and those are ideas that are already forgotten.
Right. They just kind of fizzle out, right?
They didn't quite work out. The other thing that I had to learn as I was going through my awakening is to really trust my inner self. I asked a lot of people who I gave undue status or knowingness to, and so I wanted to hear what other people said, and ultimately I knew I can now look back and go, I ultimately needed to make my own decision. So why was I bothering to even ask all this? So sometimes we get into the trap of thinking other people have better knowing than we do, when all the knowing is already inside of us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's something to be said, though, for having other people be a sounding board. So we can, and people that we ultimately trust, run ideas past people that we trust as a sounding board. Ultimately, we are the only ones that know what's best for us. So it's funny, we're talking about not knowing how to channel and that you don't have that gift. And I was kind of giggling to myself, because you do, even though you don't recognize it, because everybody does. It's about listening to ourselves and our own inner voice. That's really what channeling is. It's about listening to what spirit wants to speak through us. And that's really about listening to our higher selves, to our inner voice, to our gut feelings. And you do that really well.
Yeah.
It's just a term that other people call it for getting information from source or from spirit, from higher understanding, but you're doing it too.
Yeah. And I'm
listening to yourself.
I'm going to share the screen again. I'm putting the choice box up there again, because really it comes down to, we get to choose, we get to decide. I am presenting this, and then at the same time I'm telling, like, gee, I didn't know I get to choose my own life here. And so it's funny how for me, Gumption also has become like a way of, like, it's been the lesson that I've needed to learn in my own life. So I had to learn how to live my own life with Gumption, and I'm still learning to do it so that we can ultimately teach others and help others in their learning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's how it is. We always have to learn what it is we're here to teach. And we're always learning it at a new level.
Yeah, that's right. Because, and you talked about freedom, what's your word? You just keep going deeper with that idea, right? You just keep learning more about what freedom means and different ways that freedom can affect our lives. And the same with me, Gumption, different ways that personal responsibility for our thoughts, actions, interactions, for the choices that we make, the opportunities that come into our life, the journey of life, the transitioning from one chapter to another. All of those things become, this opportunity to help others.
Right. And and we were talking about the choices, and the difference is when you go back to Gumption and self-responsibility, this is about making conscious choices.
Mm.
So I'm thinking back, and as you said in the beginning, if people want to hear your story, you and I have done this interview a couple of times. They can find it on my channel and your channel. That thinking back to that very first day when you decided to reach out to the Bubba Gump Shrimp Company and represent yourself as Gump, that took huge amounts of gumption.
Yeah.
And it was a conscious choice.
Yeah.
You didn't just fall into it. You made the choice, you took the action, and the opportunity was presented to you, and you then acted on that opportunity. It's interesting. One other thing I wanted to mention really quick when you were talking about attraction, because everything that exists in our life is attracted to us by what it is that we're resonating at. And that you were talking about magic. I always say that synchronicity is the magic of the universe. So synchronicity is part of that attraction, right? What a lot of people have this perception that the law of attraction works by just sitting and being, and that everything we want is attracted to us. Part hidden in the sandwich of the word attraction is the word act.
Mm.
And a lot of people forget that you actually need to act on things when they're presented to us. We actually need to act on them.
Yeah.
And consciously act on them. And if we don't, then the opportunity then comes and it goes. But because we didn't act on it, the opportunity then gets handed to somebody else.
Yeah. You mentioned that story of how I wasn't looking to have the job as Forrest Gump. I just heard a news story, and within about a 2.5-week period from hearing the news story to the grand opening day, it all just happened. And I knew that I either had to pick up that feather that was sitting right smack in front of me, or just kind of walk by and go, well, it wasn't meant to be, right? Or, out of fear, decided not to do it. And so I did do it, and of course, and it all worked out. But had I had months to think about it and plan it, maybe it wouldn't have worked out, right? Because, but it just was one of those moments. And so anytime a person in their life has that opportunity, it's better to try it. And, the worst that can happen, right, is that, it doesn't work out. But it's just really interesting.
Yeah. Well, if you don't ask, you don't receive.
That's right. You have to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Steve, it has been so much fun catching up with you again. I look forward to seeing you in person and seeing you with the RV. And I have like my own little flash of brilliance while you were talking about your RV, because I just started something new.
Okay.
I started a new I don't want to say business concept, but that's not quite what it is. I'm turning my teaching into a ministry. Mm. So I was seeing on the back of your RV, my logo, which is Heart of Freedom Ministries, as one of your sponsors.
Oh, let's talk.
How cool would that be? I would love to sponsor you.
Oh, that would be great. Yeah. No, this is the idea is, and it's funny. It's just been coming at its own pace, right? So I needed to do the American Gumption morning show, a virtual show. I did it for, a full year, and I did, I just pounded away at it, like singularly focused, didn't worry about any of the other stuff. So it's real funny how like we just know, like even though we have like this bigger plan, sometimes we have to take a little bit of a detour, or we need to go down a street that we weren't necessarily planning to go down, but then that sets us up or puts us right at the place where we're ready to go to that next level. And so it's so follow, everybody has their own inner brilliance and inner gumption, and just allow it to be part of your life.
All right, and follow it through. Well, thank you so much for being here. It was so fun to connect with you again today. And to all of you who are watching, remember to hold your light so high others can't help but see their own light. Together, we will create a world of peace, harmony, and prosperity for all. And as always, remember to get bold, be fearless, and live free. Amen.